Welcome to my very first vlog. This is Hinterlife Homeschool. My name is Tiffany. In this video, I reflect on my experiences over the last 4 years homeschooling my 2 children. I'm going to share with you my thoughts on homeschool rooms, deschooling, and small home storage hacks, and so much more. When I first started homeschooling my children, I found it really helpful to find a few go-to people, people that have already kind of been there and done it and have become veterans in their field. So one of those people was Julie Bogart. So she had a big influence on my style of homeschooling. And this wasn't until later on, after I'd kind of tried out a few different things and I came back and I read her book, and you can even still see, like, I've put little post-it notes there. It's just, you can highlight things that stand out to you. You don't have to take it all, and I didn't take everything that she said, but I took what felt appropriate to our family at this time. And the cool thing is with this sort of stuff is you can always go back and reread it, because as your family evolves, so does your family's needs, your homeschool needs as well. So it's really good to come back as a reference. So these kinds of books are fantastic to have on the bookshelf and just kind of have as a reference to, check back in with. Another really great book that I recommend to new homeschoolers and old as well, Ainsley, Arment, Call of the Wild and Free. So they have a nature group as well online. You can subscribe to it. Everyone knows Wild and Free. It's basically a homeschooling staple now. I really find this book just a great pick-me-up, a great motivator, a great source of inspiration to just get outside. It makes me just want to sit around a campfire. It is a beautiful book, and she covers all the philosophies and bits and pieces as well. There's beautiful pictures in these books as well, and she's got great quotes, and it's just a beautiful book. So I do suggest looking into that as well. Another great source is podcasts. So there are a huge amount of homeschooling podcasts. The very first podcast that I came across was the Homeschool Sisters, I think it was. They have a great, I'll link it in all of these things in the description notes. They have a great podcast in kind of, cutting through the overwhelm, getting past some of the walls that you've placed up. They kind of cover everything, and it's just a great all-round podcast to listen to. It's short and sweet, they're funny, and just really enjoyable to listen to. Another really good podcast is Brave Writer. So she actually, Julie Bogart, is wonderful to listen to. She just is to the point and really motivating as well. So try that podcast too. Another favorite of mine is the Homeschool Project podcast. So they interview a huge number of homeschoolers, and the variety is just wonderful to listen to road schoolers and adventurers and back to basics and off the grid families, and I just find it so motivating to listen to other people's stories, and their take on homeschooling as well is really interesting, and I get lots of ideas when I listen to that podcast. So that's a really great one to try out as well. There might be a term that you've heard, which is called deschooling. So deschooling is all about kind of letting go of the idea that school is done a certain way. Deschooling is changing the way we think about formal education. It's kind of trying to forget about how you might have been schooled, and changing that thought pattern and changing that attitude towards school, because often with our own experiences in school, they might not have been a great experience. I did not have a great experience in school. And so that can change your attitude. Having that experience, that negative experience, can really kind of make you communicate to your own children that school can be something that is like not enjoyable. So deschooling is about whether you yourself need to deschool and kind of let go of the idea of what you thought school was, and open your mind and look at what you might want your schooling to be, what your homeschool to be. And it is also, if your children came from formal education and now they are going through the process of homeschooling, and you've got a little bit of school refusal on your hands, and that they don't want to have anything to do with anything in terms of school, and the mention of school just creates arguments. We actually went through that with my son. We pulled him out of school at the beginning of grade 2, and we basically had to deschool for a pretty big chunk of time. Any mention of school or any trying to motivate him to do any formal work was just not, he wasn't having it. And I don't blame him, because he went through quite a bit. So that's something to investigate. Fearless Homeschool, I'll link her in the notes as well, is a great reference for deschooling. When people start homeschooling, they start to worry about all the things and where they're going to put them and how they're going to store them, and do we need a homeschool room, and do we need all of the homeschool equipment and all the things that you have at a school, do you need that at home? And the simple answer is no, you really don't. And you would be surprised at how little space that you actually really need in order to homeschool. So I have a dedicated homeschool space that we have literally just introduced recently. Up until that point, we were just using the dining table, and that worked fantastic. In fact, we got rid of our smaller dining table and got quite a large dining table, just so we could have a bit more space. So aside from that, we really didn't make a huge amount of changes to our home to facilitate homeschooling. While my children were younger, our projects were smaller, and the craft stuff and all of those bits and pieces, the art supplies, were pretty much the only real full-on homeschool supplies that we really needed at the time. Now that we have, they're starting to get a little bit older, we're getting, more equipment and bits and pieces coming into the home. I'm finding myself getting a little bit more creative with the storage process of that. So we have converted a sideboard into some storage for homeschooling supplies, all of the ugly stuff like the printer, and I didn't want to have to go back and forth to the office to get printing, so I hid it within the sideboard, and that works perfectly. It's so good. There's a couple of other things, like we got a large trestle table. I actually had that from some previous projects that I had been working on, and it is fantastic. The legs fold down, the table is just a large piece of plywood, and it can be put away if we want, or we can take it outside if we want. It's really lightweight, it's really easy to move around, and we've just gotten some cheap chairs that look fantastic. And because we don't really sit at a table for long periods of time, so I didn't want to spend the money in those areas. I wanted to spend the money on experiences and excursions, because that's where we really hold value, and that's where my children really learn. If you value a lot of inside time and around the table time, think about what that entails. Is that more of a dining room space? Maybe it would be great for you to set up your homeschool in that area, and allocate some, some storage in those rooms, in that room. But you do not need a specific homeschool room / classroom. If you don't have a lot of room for storage, or you don't want to store a lot of books, a great thing to incorporate into your homeschool resources is your local library. Get cards for the children and make it something that you do once a week, because it's one of our most treasured things that we do each week is go and visit our library. I think that a great place to start when you're thinking about your homeschool and what you want it to be is to actually set yourself some goals for the year. That's what I do when I start my planning for the year. I actually sit down and I think about what goals that we want to achieve. I'm not just talking about like learning goals or outcomes or any of the syllabus type stuff. I'm talking about like the real life goals, like mindset or habit shifts, or things that can really, really make your home life better for your kids, and skills that they can learn that they'll have for the rest of their lives as well, like cooking, you know, being able to independently cook pancakes, for example. That could be a goal for your child. Talk to them and ask them about the kinds of things that they want to learn that year, and write them all down. Collaborate together and make a plan together. Maybe they want to learn how to you know, maybe they want to learn martial arts, or maybe they want to learn how to climb a tree. There are just so many things that you can include into your own personal homeschool goals that could help make you have a real focus on what kind of curriculum you want to include to complement that, and build around those goals. And then that way, you have collaborated with your children in building this amazing lifestyle, and you're all kind of working towards the goals together, and you can check them off and high five and celebrate at the end of the year, looking back at what you've achieved. And each year we get more and more excited about planning those goals because we have been working together towards them. Now, of course, there are learning goals included in that, but they're not as important as the real personal goals as well. Some are, but I just wanted to point out that homeschooling doesn't have to be, when you're talking about goals, or learning goals or any of that, it doesn't have to be specific to outcomes. We don't have to talk the, you know, education lingo like the schools have to. We don't have to be rigid in our thinking of what we can achieve throughout the year and only think about, you know, school being school and life being life. It is all together, guys. So that is probably the biggest factor that I realized probably a little bit later than I should have. It took me a little while to get out of that, you know, formal school mindset. Guys, thanks so much for joining me. I hope that I've addressed some of your concerns or your pain points for your homeschool. Guys, I'd love for you to join me in the next video where our family collaboratively plans our homeschooling goals and what that looks like.